a desire for power. That is what usually drives the sons and daughters of monarchs in the pursuit of the throne. But, not in Royal Tutor. Not really sure why the four princes even want to be kin. I mean, none of them would make a really good kin, and there's already an heir and a crown prince. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm anime lore, and I plan to make videos about anime, history, and various things connected to them. If that interests you, please subscribe to the channel. Onto the video about Session and Royal Tutor. Oishitsu Kiyoshi Haine, or in English, The Royal Tutor, is an anime about a new tutor which is charged with making the four princes, the second to fifth in line for the throne, into good candidates to be Grindrik's future kin. It's based on the manga of the same name by Aikai Higasa. Do note, though, I've only seen the anime and the movie, so I apologize to any manga readers if my complaints don't exist in the manga. I'll go over the tutor, the kin, the crown prince, and the four princes to explain who they are and how good of heirs I think they are based on what we see in the anime. I'll also quickly cover succession in general, particularly in Europe. Heine Wittgenstein is arguably a great royal tutor, and would have to be intelligent for not having any formal education at university or anything like that, and still be able to be a tutor. This can be seen with how he helps his students, particularly the princes obvious, solve various problems and pushes them to be their best. His background in the beginning is a complete mystery. And if I'm being honest, it takes way too long to even learn that he has a connection and a past with the kin. But to explain his past with the kin, long ago, when Kin Victor and Heine were teenagers, they met by accident after then Prince Victor had snuck out of the palace. It was there the two formed a friendship, and Victor saw firsthand how the conditions the poor lived in. After being discovered by the palace guards one night during a national festival, they arrested Heine, believing him to be a potential kidnapper of Victor, even despite Victor pretty clearly not being there against his will. After Victor had recovered from being shot by said guards, meaning to have shot Heine, Heine's name was cleared, but despite this, he still is somehow considered a criminal by somebody, or at least enough to be a scandal. A royal pardon should have removed any stain of being arrested in my opinion, or at least most of it. So it being potential dirt against Heine later in the season makes little sense. While they were together as teenagers, Heine and Victor came up with and shared a dream about making the kingdom more prosperous and more peaceful, solving food issues and giving education to everyone, including the poor. Heine is chosen as the royal tutor to educate the princes, so the work which is done already by King Victor towards that goal isn't undone. When he starts out, a few of them. Despite this, the princes argue for him to be reinstated as the royal tutor before a council of the kingdom's nobles, who had gathered to choose the next tutor. Through a very coordinated speech from the four of them, they do convince the council to reinstate him, much to the displeasure of Prince Ines, who was hoping for a more useless tutor. The lack of information for Heine is frustrating, but at least we know where he was during the time skip between the flashback and the present. During that time, he was teaching at an orphanage. As for King Victor, we know pretty much nothing. He became kin shortly after the incident with Heine being arrested. But what he was doing after that, I'm not really sure. I would say, comparing the flashbacks to the present, it does seem like the kingdom has improved, and they do seem to say as much. So I'll take their word for it and say it has. Although we do never actually go to the poor areas in the present. Instead, we stick to the wealthier areas of the capital. One other thing about him that is known is that he's supposed to be a warrior king, which does go against his goal of a peaceful kingdom. And he's supposed to have improved the nation's military, which is fine. He probably has won several wars if he has this reputation, none of which is explored in detail, unfortunately. As for his relationship with his sons, it's kind of strange how he treats the two separate groups, the Crown Prince and the four princes. I'm not really sure why he considers them all as potential candidates for the throne. As a father, he's fairly good. I'm not really sure how he treats Prince Ainz. We don't really get much interaction nor explanation of their past. Um, so I don't know why potential maybe he doesn't consider him an acceptable heir. As for Prince Ainz, he's the eldest and is the crown prince, which would normally mean he's the heir to the throne, which I assume he is. This should mean King Victor made him the crown prince, so his younger brothers should really only be spares in case Ainz dies suddenly. Whether he is a good crown prince is really hard to say, as I don't really know much about him. He does seem to already be serving in the role of a crown prince, so I assume he's trusted to be competent. Although the dumbest thing about him is trying to legally remove his brothers from the line of succession by trying to get them to pursue other paths, trying to get them to be disqualified. Like when he tries to get Bruno to go study and become a professor, and when he tries to get Reinhard disqualified for being an idiot. If session works like the German Empire, as I think it's based on the German Empire, then he should be completely secure in the session. He should be the one to inherit the throne. The only way the brothers could get it is with a coup, which is extremely unlikely that they would even attempt this. So he should be secure in that for the throne. Prince Kai, the second in line for the throne, he's overly reserved, comes off as outright hostile at first. He's excessively shy. He does improve throughout the anime. He ends up making friends with most of the palace staff. This is done with the help of Heine, the tutor, of course. But he's still too shy, he's still too reserved by the end of it, and he would be able to easily be played by most nobles or even commoners. His biggest weakness by far is his kindness and naivety, which for kindness isn't necessarily a bad trait, but for a king in excess, it's a really dangerous trait. As an explanation of this, as part of his background with Prince Bruno as well, they attended military school, and Prince Bruno was being bullied by a noble kid who was either bold enough or foolish enough to hit a royal on purpose while they were practicing dueling. And naturally, this escalated into this kid outright beating the crap out of Bruno, and Kai walked in and he beat the crap out of the noble kid. The noble kid was expelled, but later on, during the prison in the anime, this gets published in the anime, and of course, completely blames the princes of abuse of royal authority. Prince Kai's solution to this problem is that he wants to talk to this noble kid, and well, Heine agrees. They go there. They have guards, of course. The guards get taken out. Both of them get kidnapped, and they only get escaped because Heine turns out to be a complete beast when it comes to fighting. And so, of course, after this whole thing, the noble kid is arrested. Prince Kai hasn't learned his lesson that somebody was out to get him, either the paper or the noble kid. It turned out to be the noble kid, of course. And so he offers the noble kid, hey, when you get out of jail, come work for me as a palace guard. That is completely foolish. That gets people killed. That could easily get him killed. That could get his brothers killed. Having a guard that they don't trust is a really bad idea. And if he treats people like this, he's going to get played and he's going to get manipulated really easily. He is simply not a good candidate for the throne, even if he is the next in line after Prince Heinz. Prince Bruno, the third in line for the throne, and also probably my favorite of the four, is the typical book smart character, the typical I study 100% of the time character. He's the most intelligent and the most diligent of the princes. Uh, at times, he's inflexible and he's told this, and he does work on this over time. But this can be bad or this can be good. It really depends on the situation. Uh, and when he needs to be flexible, advisors could help. As for working off of others' ideas, he's shown to be able to do this fairly well. He does this with several of his brother's ideas, where he takes them and puts them into practice much better than they could. While intelligent, I'm not sure how well he would handle nobles plotting. He might be able to figure out the plots and figure out what they're doing, but how well he would be able to handle them in person I'm not really sure how charismatic he could be. His biggest weakness is probably his lack of martial prowess, though. I'm not really sure how good he is at all that stuff, like riding and swordsmanship, but I'd probably say he's just about average. Which is fine, and probably why he was bullied in the first place, or maybe the kid just disliked royals. Anyway, how much of this is even important is hard to say. A contemporary period that's based off historically. It would be a valued skill for a royal to have, especially in Germany where it was a little more militarized, but if military service was expected of him later in life, he probably could get by if he's just average. For an officer, his intelligence would likely be more important anyway. As such, Bruno, in my opinion, is a good candidate for the throne. If he has advisors that would aid with his inflexibility at times and help him deal with nobles, he would probably make a pretty good candidate, in my opinion. Prince Leinhard, the fourth in line for the throne, is the complete opposite of Bruno, is a complete idiot and extremely simple-minded. As king, he would be easily manipulated and controlled by nobles and advisors. While he has the capacity to learn, to be fair, this really was never exploited by previous tutors due to them being abusive and him running away, which is changed with Heine, though. Despite that fact, though, of his simple-mindedness, he is able to think outside the box and think of solutions that others wouldn't, as he was the one to propose an insurance scheme for fires, although someone would likely have to modify that plan to make it a workable and actual plan. His biggest strength is definitely he's really good at athletics, riding, swordsmanship. He's probably, if they have guns, he's probably trained in that too. And while I think this is more of a secondary skill, especially in this modern period that the anime is set in, I think would still be useful in any wars that should come when he's king. He's shown to be extremely arrogant at times, but he's actually really insecure. If he's second guessing himself, that could be bad. Overall, I wouldn't rate him a very good potential king. But I think he would serve a very good role in supporting his brothers as an advisor or something like that. For one of his other brothers, of course. Prince Licht, the fifth in line for the throne, is also intelligent, but unlike Bruno, it's more of a cunning and clever type of intelligence, one to be used to solve intrigues and plots. As he, in particular, is the first one to figure out that there's a past connection between Heine and his father, the king. Overall, he's just generally more charismatic and used to dealing with various people. He's your typical playboy prince, which is fine as long as no scandal is produced by that. It does give him connections with various nobles. At some point, he managed to get a job secretly at a coffee cafe as a waiter. This is allowed by his father and his Professor Heine when they find out, on the condition that Heine stays and watches him during his shifts. But the skills he learned here could be useful as kin, as they somewhat overlap in how you deal with nobles, how you treat people. This can be seen with how his father handles a shift in when he works there for a night. He handles it quite well. He handles it honestly better than his son does. But overall, his decent intelligence and his good charisma make him, I think, an excellent candidate. He would likely be able to keep the nobles in check fairly well. I'm not, out of all of them, I'm not really sure if he's wants the position though, if he even wants to be kin. I think he would be a good kin, or if he is not a kin, I think he would be able to support his brothers very well. I'm a pretty big history buff, so of course I'm going to talk about secession here. As for the secession in the anime, it's pretty much nothing is known. All we know is somehow they maybe are potential candidates for the throne. Talking about historical secession, really focusing on European secession, as I think it is based off of Europe, particularly Germany and some Austrian there. European secession was usually hereditary, with the exception of the Holy Roman Empire, which for a time was elective, which maybe is what they have there, but if it was, it should be really mentioned. It's never made clear. So I would just normally assume it would be based off a typical hereditary monarchy of variations, but usually the first child, the first son, would inherit first, and that would be Prince Heinz. To make things more weird, King Victor pretty clearly made Prince Heinz the Crown Prince. That's not usually a title someone is automatically given, even if they are the rightful heir. It's usually a title given later. It's an assumed title, but to my impression, it would be a title that would allow them to fulfill the role of heir more aptly, I'd say. So if King Victor really didn't end up liking Heinz for whatever reason, and if he didn't like him, and that's kind of on his fault, but if he were to attempt to even make one of his younger sons the heir, he would likely be pissing off plenty of people for violating the laws of his own kingdom, potentially, and as well as going back on his own actions of making Prince Heinz the Crown Prince. So yeah, secession makes no sense in this anime. It would make a lot more sense if it was clarified. Maybe it is elected. In that case, they all really have a shot. But other than that, it makes no sense why there's a conflict of the throne. I don't get that. I don't know. This isn't the anime to watch if you want a good plot. The characters are decently well done, but the overall plot and the quest for the throne makes no sense at all. Session makes no sense at all. Well, if you made it to the end of the video, I obviously wouldn't really recommend the anime. Unless you want to see the characters, okay then. But if anything sounds interesting, maybe check out the manga. I don't know if that's better. If you liked the video though, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be making more videos about anime and history and various things relating to that. Thanks for watching.